I didn't hear it.
Clock's 3 minutes slow.
Not again.
Yeah. I think we've got to spend more than $2.99 for the next clock. Okay. Great fire report. Hang on. I'm out of order here. Let the fellow.
That's how I did that.
Okay, I'm ready. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We are sitting as a committee of the whole in the village of Westport on Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd like to welcome everybody to council chambers, as well as anybody who is watching.
So we're going to begin tonight's meeting of the Committee of the Whole by acknowledging that we're meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal peoples who have been the stewards of this place. And in particular, we acknowledge the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee people.
Good. Thank you very much, Councillor Crapper. Item number 3 is the adoption of the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Crapper, that the agenda for the May 13th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as one. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none.
Got one here. There might be a perceived conflict for me for item number 6.6.
All right, thank you. Okay. There's no personal,
No personal.
you don't receive any money.
No, no conflict then?
There's no pecuniary, but
Okay.
every person has to name their own conflict. I can only say if it were me, I wouldn't see a conflict because it's like FOTA. It's the work that we do there, but you declare, you can mull that over and see how you do when we get to
Sit
that.
one out.
Okay, all right, that's fair. So we have a delegation tonight and then other speakers. We have our fire chief, Gene Richardson, here to give us our annual fire update. So please come ahead, chief, and thank you very much for being here on this beautiful, beautiful night.
Well, I'm leaving here and going to Toronto, so
Sweet.
Oh,
I'm going to Advocacy Day tomorrow with the OLFC,
with EOWC?
Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs.
Oh, and EOWC's there as well. It's gonna be busy.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, very good. Go ahead, please, sir.
Just my report is just, again, my recommendation that you accept this as information. Administration wise, we doing as much as we can. Software, we changed to a new software program called Fire Pro. It actually, next year you'll get a fancy little graph instead of just me writing things out. It's actually better. I started mid-January 1st, so in next year's numbers, we'll get a graph. It'll show you in the pie chart how many you got, how many calls you have, all the different types of calls. We entered into agreement with Firemark to cover some of our costs. I know you understand a little bit about what Firemark is, but Wheel Lakes has entered into agreement with them to recoup some of the cost from the insurers, not from the insured, from the companies. Recruitment efforts have been going strong still. Westport has actually increased up to 14, so that's a bonus. It's really done well. We've transferred a couple of people over, but we also increased by bringing on some new recruits, and there's one more to come on in the village, just going through the paperwork right now. We still have one station that's not as well as the other ones, but we're working on that, see what happens. Staffing and incidents continue to be a challenge because of where people work. We're calling it 2 stations. I just changed the station call out here. I was calling 2 stations for all calls, but now I've changed it to just major calls. So MVCs and structure fires will call 2 stations, and the other ones are just the alarm calls, the automatic will call for the students. Station chiefs and all station meetings have been scheduled throughout the year, so we have regular meetings. Before it was just sort of whenever they had an opportunity to meet. Now we've done it every month. There's something. It's either a district chiefs meeting, then the next month's an officers, and the next month is all station meeting, so everybody comes. The next month is an all station, everybody will be here in June. So, and we move it around to different locations, so. We're currently discussing with manufacturers, the updating of the pumper and rescue station 4 here in Westport. Through Peter Evans' suggestion, we're working with an individual who may end up making 2 trucks into one. Make a pumper rescue out of it rather than having 2 trucks. And that will be a little bit better even for the paramedics, because we can move the trucks around. We won't have to worry so much about the back underneath the overhang in the building. So that's It's not, probably won't get delivered till 2026, 2027, but that's okay, we'll work with them as much as we can. We also work on the canoe program, so it'll become a direct cost from them, so we don't have to worry so much about procurement, so we'll work with it, so.
Are they ordered now? Is it?
No, we're in the process of just designing it right at the moment.
Got
Met with them when I was at the Fire Peace Conference a couple weeks ago, sat down, had a good discussion. I've sent him all the drawings of the building, so he knows how much space we have. He does have a concept drawing, so he knows what we're looking for. So, yeah. That's it, right.
I'm just thinking tariffs, if we drag this
They're
conversation out
Canadian
longer.
built. They're Canadian built,
Oh, okay.
so maybe because depending on the cost of what their materials coming up, but in Canadian built, there is a pushback right now to get firing stuff tariff free. But we'll see what happens. It's not been presented. It has been presented, but it's not been affirmed yet that we're gonna get it that way, but these are. Canadian
Somebody
built.
started that rumor and it was all emergency services and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
nothing to it, yeah.
And the truck that we're talking about will come from Maxi Metal, which is a Quebec-based company.
Good, good.
Training plans, personnel maintain and enhance operational skills, so everybody's, we got some in-house delivery, so we're doing some stuff in-house, we're also doing some stuff out of house. We're sending people to experience other places. We're trying to make the 2026 deadline. The village here is in good conditions, the new people still have to finish their stuff, but it's in reasonably good condition here. We do have some individuals that are, as of 2026, as they said, they're gonna be done, which is unfortunate, that's what it is, that's part of my advocacy tomorrow, is to talk about that when I come there. So, I do believe there needs to be standards, but there needs also be a bit of a give and take. You know, I'll give an example for water rescue training, it's through the roof, I think, but it's my own personal opinion, but you have to do a swim test. I don't know, I'm not a strong swimmer, but I can swim, but when you gotta swim and most people are failing the swim test, that's what's happening.
Really?
They're failing the swim test. Yeah, so
Commander, what happens then?
when they fail the swim test,
Yeah.
have a good day,
Wow.
thank you, see you later, come
Wow.
back again.
Huh.
Yeah, there's no give or take on it, unfortunately, so. Yeah. Call 18 calls, I think that's what it says, 18 calls for assistance last year, mine kind of got faded because I printed off my printer at work at my office, and, for the village, I had 18 calls. 4 medical, 1 motor vehicle, 8 carbon monoxide / smoke alarms, 3 public assistance, 1 burning complaint, and 1 other. Okay? And a total of, Rita Lakes totally had 229 calls, so 18 calls ends up being about 8 to 10% of the calls in Westport. And zero ice water rescue in the village, 0 structure fires and 0 vehicle fires, so not to be last year. Not like this year, I'm gonna tell you, to be honest with you, we've had 14 calls in the last 2 weeks.
Really?
Not here, but all over.
Fires, like our grass fire, I think?
2 grass fires,
Yeah.
3 structures, 3 MVCs, the drowning, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and a few other medicals and a few other alarms, so 14 in the last 2 weeks, so been busy for the last 2 weeks. And that's all I have.
I've got 2 questions, but you guys go ahead.
Regarding the contract with Firemark, as I understand it, when you put in to recover your costs, you'd invoice them with manpower, equipment, blah, 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 and are these fixed costs, is there a set rate?
I can answer that, sir. They take an average cost of a firefighter wage, we take an average cost of a full-time employee's wage, and an average cost of, so in our case, the firefighters, the district chiefs, the cap, and the lieutenants all get different rates, but we take an average of those. We include how many's on each, have been on the scene, and we take an hourly rate and apply it to them. The apparatus they use the MTO rate for apparatus. That's current MTO rate, so we take 5 trucks, they get charged whatever the MTO rate is for those 5 trucks.
So second question, does Westport being under contract to Rita Lakes, does that impact that in any way?
No, not that I'm aware of.
So
because
there's no,
not be-
we can't share in the recovery, then is what I'm getting at it.
I can ask that question for you.
Because it's not a fire department recovery, it's a municipal recovery, right?
No, it's a fire department recovery because it goes directly to the fire department for fire prevention.
It does.
Yeah, you can't, it doesn't go into the coffers for everything, it goes into the fire department. That's the agreement, what's in there, it tells you right in it. Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah, no problem, well, that makes sense, totally, I get it, I understand what you're asking.
But one would think no reason why we're This is our.
No,
this is
it's
our
going to fire
service.
department.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is about the new vehicle that is in the works. Would we sell the two that are there right now or, yes?
We would surplus them and to be
Okay.
honest with you, it would be whatever you get from them. There's no real, you could get $100, you could get $5,000, you could get 20,000, depends. I sold a half ton a couple weeks ago, got 1,700. I sold the rehab truck that was sitting outside here for a long time and got 15,000, so.
Okay.
So,
It's,
two questions. One is, the recovery of the drowning person.
Yeah.
Was that your people?
no, that's OPP.
And my second one is, so my concern is if we can't fill our ranks with volunteers, at some point, the government's gonna take a look at it and take some different decisions, right?
Yeah.
And there's something very important to our communities to have volunteer, what we still refer to as volunteer firefighters. When was and a firefighter is a firefighter and a cop's a cop. I get the argument. I've made it many times from your perspective, chief. I'm just wondering, when was the last time we reviewed the physical requirements? Hear my whole question before you start thinking, no. When was the last time that we reviewed the hiring requirements? Because many things have changed as well as the equipment we use. And is that something that's in play amongst chiefs that the requirements that may, like swimming is your example. I was thinking physical, but swimming, because there's something intuitive about if you're gonna do water rescue, you should be able to swim, but you're not going in to do water rescue without your personal flotation device and everything else on. Are hiring standards something that you chiefs talk
So
about?
hiring standards have changed a little bit. Obviously, when I joined 31 years ago, it was, shake my hand, the chief shook my hand and say, come to the meeting next Wednesday. But no, now it's different. We write a test. We do a physical test, like they actually do a physical.
Oh, I get that.
They come to the hall and do physical testing. So in the case of other departments station-wise, everybody's doing the same thing.
Got it?
It's changed to that point where you have to do it. You can't just bring on a
Understood.
person, shake their hand and come on next week, in a general area. I'm sure there's some other departments out there are still doing that. But what happens is now you have to have the standards, so that within 24 months, they have to do firefighter 1, firefighter 2, and
Understood.
hazmat and awareness. And that's where it becomes difficult, because then people have to commit to doing that training in that time frame. And Peter can maybe help me out here. It's basically 12 weeks, right? Every weekend or every second?
Fire one,
Or fire 1 and fire 2,
Houseman.
12 weeks, if somebody has a young family trying to go away for 12 weeks. We have had people that started and left after the first little while, can't do it.
So from your answer, I take it that you're suggesting that it's not the entry requirement that is keeping people away. It is the prescribed training by the government.
In my opinion, yes, not the entry part.
Okay.
The entry part, if you're physically not able to do it, they know that, they can tell you that, but it's not. It's the requirement as you move forward.
Okay, well, thanks, chief. Anybody, anything coming out of that? Oh, sorry, go ahead,
One more,
Councillor Carr.
for my own information, at one time, departments could exempt themselves from certain things, like if you didn't have an aerial ladder, you didn't have to do aerial training. Do you have that option now? Can you pick and choose, or they're just telling you this is?
Yeah, you still don't have to do aerial. The firefighter 1 and firefighter 2 has nothing to do with apparatus, in a sense. You do use an apparatus, you do hose streams, etc. But as far as an aerial, no, you don't have to do aerial.
So there are things you could forego if the manpower wasn't, like water rescue. Is that an option, or?
You can forego water rescue, but I mean, we live in an area where
Yeah,
there's lots
for
of
sure.
lakes, so that's the question, right? So the requirements for the team has changed. At one time, I know back years ago, I took the ice water rescue training when the Rito Regional was still going.
Yeah.
We went there and did the ice water rescue corridor, the Rito ice water rescue tour, so it went from Kingston to Ottawa. The corridor gave us boats, they gave us all the suits, and we took the training as instructors, and we went back and instructed on our own.
Mhm.
We can't do that anymore. It has to be through the college, or it has to be through a learning contract to get people to train for you.
Yeah.
So it's just the requirements, and there's requirements on both sides that are changed, that's all.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Right, so our motion is moved by Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Card, that the committee of the whole receive the annual fire report from the fire chief. All the question, all in favor, carried. Thank you for coming,
Thank
chief.
Thank you.
Safe roads to Toronto.
Thank you.
All righty.
Bye.
All right, so we move to item 5.6.1. And so tonight we have a couple of things on the table. We have both the draft subdivision plan and the zoning bylaw amendment for watercolor. And I just want to give a little preamble because we talked about this at the mayor's breakfast last week, and at that point in time, the subdivision plan was coming ahead tonight and not the zoning bylaw. And I think I told the group having breakfast that it was just counterintuitive to me, but that was the way that staff had planned it. And then this week, our consultants and staff and I met, and we felt that so that council can have a full understanding of what's ahead of them, that they'll both be tonight. So I'm not too sure what order we're gonna do it in, but we've got Mark and Stephen, and are you gonna make a present? I don't put you on the spot.
I can speak.
Would you mind? Okay, and then Mark, you're here to answer any questions.
Exactly.
All right.
Next comes up.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Everybody knows me. I'm Steve Pence, plan consultant to the village, and we've been asked with the review of the applications for proposed plan subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment. I'm here to present my report. I'm going to keep my presentation very high level, because I think all the details that I would like you to know about are in the report. And then I'll leave lots of time for questions from the committee.
Great, thank you.
I've prepared a brief PowerPoint just to kind of guide the discussion, and I'll just kind of work through that as I deliver the details of my report. So, as Mayor Jones just said, this is a report on both the subdivision and zoning application. They were filed concurrently. And so it makes sense that they come together so that when making a decision, you have a complete understanding of the full package that's submitted, because the two kind of go hand in hand, even though their approval authorities are by two different bodies. So let's go to the first slide, please. Well, I guess I've got that control tonight, I think. As long as I know which button to press, and I think I figured it out. So a little bit of background on the slide here to start with. Draft plan, the subdivision and zoning applications were filed in June 2024 for 172 units. Through a preliminary review of the submission and some comments that were made on the application, that application ended up being revised, and a revised submission was filed in February of 2025. Shouldn't say filed, but resubmitted. And that revised submission was for a total of 62 units. The counties of the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville is the approval authority for subdivisions in this jurisdiction. The village is the approval authority for zoning bylaw amendments. So it's a little bit, sometimes a little bit difficult to kind of think through that, but there's two different agencies making decisions. And the two applications are concurrent, so there's some coordination required. No public meetings are required for subdivision these days. However, there is a zoning bylaw amendment requirement for a public meeting. So that's why for those that were attending a public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment didn't get to attend a public meeting for the subdivision. But we did ask the developer to host some open houses in relation to the proposal. And they obliged with 3 open houses that were hosted in recent weeks. And from what I understand, they were very well attended. Oh, I should just say on the side there is the subject lands are for phase 3 of the subdivision, which is immediately adjacent to the second phase and to the first phase. Along with the applications, a number of studies were filed to support the applications. The list is long. Planning rationale or justification report, servicing report, conceptual stormwater management report, transportation impact study, environmental impact statement, geotechnical report, noise study, odor impact study, mineral resource impact assessment, stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment, and of course, the draft plan of subdivision. So those were all what was required of the village and of the counties to make complete applications. I would say it's a very comprehensive thing that's been reviewed and very to my report to this year. So on the screen here now is the draft plan of subdivision. I highlighted in red are the draft plan lands. That draft plan is for a total of 50 lots for single detached dwellings, shown as lots 1 to 50. Within that area, and I should say that area is about 4.7 hectares in total. There's 3 blocks that are highlighted, maybe difficult to see. I tried to use some color, but there's 3 blocks for semi-detached dwellings for a total of 6 units. There are 2 blocks for townhouse dwellings for a total of 6 units. And the 2 green blocks that you see are for parkland or open space. The smaller of which is approximately 1,000 square meters that is reserved for intended for some sort of active programming, if you will. And the larger block to the bottom of the page there is a larger 13,000 square meter parcel, largely intended as open space for passive usage and potentially some active programming space as well, as shown on the draft plan. I should say that the parkland itself represents about 25 or 24% of the lot area of the entire subdivision draft plan. So it's a large piece. And 2 new streets and some street extensions, all of which have an 18-meter right-of-ways, which is consistent with what the village would rely on for a standard that is acceptable. Associated with the subdivision application was the zoning amendments. You can see on the image to the left, in large part, the entirety of the draft plan lands are proposed to be rezoned to an R2 exception zone. I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then the parkland blocks are proposed to be rezoned to an open space zone. The R2 exception zone, and I'll talk about zoning in more detail a little bit later, but it's intended to accommodate single detached dwellings, townhouses, and semi-detached. And associated with those principal uses are a number of exceptions that have been requested through the zoning bylaw amendment listed as lot area, lot frontage, some exceptions for yard requirements, lot coverage, dwelling unit area, yard and porch encroachments, as well as driveway width. I would say that in large part, many of those are exceptions that have been granted on some of the previous draft plan and zoning approvals. So it's generally consistent with former zoning or existing zoning on earlier phases. And I will talk about those particular exceptions in more detail shortly. So I won't get into too much detail on the planning review comments. I think the report speaks to, but there are a few important points I would like to make here. In reviewing both the subdivision and zoning applications, we have to be mindful of what the provincial planning statement says. The province released a new planning statement in October of 2024. What didn't change is that all decisions by municipal councils have to be consistent with those policy statements. So in my report, I spent some time talking about what the provincial interests are. They range from things like density and intensification and compact urban form. Development of this sort be directed to settlement areas where growth is intended to occur in an efficient manner. Also speaks to things like infrastructure and servicing requirements to make sure there's enough reserve capacity, to make sure municipal services are used efficiently, those sorts of themes. Talks about resources, things like natural environment, so natural heritage considerations, proximity to aggregates, all those kinds of resource, many of which don't apply to this urban context, but those are the themes of these resources in the provincial planning statement. And another section deals with things like natural hazards, so dealing with things like flooding, contamination, things that are hazards to human health. Not so relevant in this context. All that to say is that in our review of the applications, we conclude that our applications are consistent with the policies of the PPS. The next document here, is the United Counties and Regional Official Plan. That's an official plan for the counties that is intended to guide development throughout the counties. It is a fairly high level document in some ways. It directs a lot of the decision making to local municipalities. It designates the village of Westport as an urban settlement area. And through that designation, it directs growth to settlement areas. So what it's saying is that this form of subdivision development for residential uses and a bunch of other types of uses that support communities are to be directed to settlement areas. And the guiding policies for that localized growth is to be sort of illustrated, not illustrated, but it should be laid out in the local official plans. The county's plan reiterates a lot of the content of the provincial planning statement, so there's a lot of repeat in there. And we would conclude that the draft plan and zoning applications are in conformity with the county's official plan. Taking it down to the level of the village official plan, this is a fairly new document for the village that I worked on. This document is organized by a bunch of different planning themes, things like infrastructure planning, environmental planning, natural hazards planning, all the sort of the same sort of themes that we see in the upper tier policies are carried through. And then we have lands that are designated general urban. A large part of the municipality is designated as urban, and that's an urban designation that allows for quite a range of urban uses. And amongst those uses are things like residential uses. So the designation permits a range of uses, it permits a range of densities, and it also provides for a housing mix that is to be achieved through residential development. And, I won't get into any more detail, but I'm happy to take questions on that when the time comes. And finally, the Planning Act sets out some criteria that in making a decision on subdivisions, we need to make sure that we consider. And so we've reviewed the draft plan application against those criteria and concluded that the application for subdivision adheres to those criteria. And those are laid out in my report as well. So I wish I wore my glasses because I can't see that from my understanding. But what this chart is going to do here is to lay out the details of the zoning bylaw amendment.
Marty often has extra set of glasses.
I can refer to another handout that I have.
Page
here
52.
that
Can we
I
give
can
Steve a
work
copy
on,
of
so
that?
it's not a problem.
You can have my hard copy.
I have.
Oh, okay. That would be funnier if you wore Marty's glasses, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't need them for this. These are just for reading.
No, that's fine. I can work this way.
All right.
So the zoning bylaw zones these lands as rural. That rural zoning in the current bylaw from 2008 is in large part sort of a development reserve zone. It identifies lands for future growth, and the proposed development needs to be rezoned to accommodate the proposed residential subdivision. So the zoning amendment was filed to request special exceptions on the basis and on the strength of the subdivision application that was filed. So what I mean by that is the subdivision lays out a number of lots and streets and blocks, and those lot sizes and lot frontages have to comply with zoning. So the zoning that has been applied for is an R2 zone that would allow singles, semis, and towns, and the zoning bylaw sets out certain lot area and frontage standards for those types of uses. So down the, and so the exceptions that have been applied for are specific exceptions to deal with lot areas and frontages and coverage that they don't comply with in terms of the current zoning of those uses. And on the left side of the screen, I have the R2 exception zone, the R2 exception zone performance standards that have been applied for that I mentioned previously. And in the chart to the right, I've listed in 3 categories: the singles, semis, and towns. That lists the various down the middle column of the standard that applies to those types of uses. And then down the right side is just a brief indication of whether or not the and exceptions required to that standard. I won't, maybe I should, let me know if you want me to spend time on this chart or if you want to come back to it for questions. But the intention here was just to highlight the various exceptions that are granted or being sought through the amendment. I would say that in many cases, well, let's just start from the top. With the singles, the lot area requirements you can see is 450 square meters. And the request is for a 345 square meter lot. So it's smaller than what the bylaw standard is for singles. Similarly, the lot frontage requirement is 15 meters. And in relation to singles, the application requests a lot frontage of 11.5 meters. So what we're saying here is that the draft plan application is based on some smaller lot sizes and that would be set out in the townships or the villages only bylaw. And that's not a bad thing, it just means that they're looking for some relief from that standard. Associated with the singles, we're also looking for exceptions to things like front yard, reducing it from 6 meter standard to 4 meters. Sort of regularizing the interior yard standards, so it's not so complicated, but looking for a 1.2 meter standard, which is consistent with a lot of urban development we see these days. The big one that everybody is probably has questions about is lot coverage, seeking a reduction or sort of an increase from 35% to 60%. And then lesser, sort of more trivial types of exceptions for things like driveway width and encroachments. Moving to semis, it's sort of the same exceptions, but I would note that you'll see that lot area, the standard is 650 square meters, and they're seeking 245 square meters per unit. And the standard for frontage is 21 meters, and they're seeking 7.5. So don't be fooled by the numbers. That variance or that difference isn't something to be concerned about, because the standard is assuming that those is for the entire lot containing both units. So when you think about it, that's really about the standard with zoning bylaw sets it out is assuming that those units aren't going to be divided one day for freehold ownership. So the standards that have been sought is that each side would have 225 square meter per unit area, which isn't far off the standard from the standards in the zoning bylaw. Townhouse dwellings, similar sort of theme here. Looking for some relief from area and frontage. What's interesting in the bylaw, in this case, it does contemplate lot areas of 180 square meters, which is for the one individual unit. So it's kind of takes a different approach from semis, which is confusing, but we know that it would make no sense to have 650 square meters per unit on a semi.
Right.
So looking just to sort of standardize that so that when the time comes to lift these part lot control applications as dealt with in the past, that the zoning will still continue to apply and work for the purpose of zoning compliance.
Question?
Do you want questions now? Why don't we just see coming to conclusion? Let me pull it together. Go ahead, Steve.
So I just thought I'd put up a few conclusions based on my review of this package of applications. The first conclusion is the proposed plan of subdivision represents a logical and efficient use of land and infrastructure and provides for seamless integration with earlier phases of development. I think we can agree that the location is suitable on the basis of the draft plan application, the lot configuration, street orientation, all those sorts of things we look for in a draft plan makes for a logical integration. And I can say that it's something we can support. Second conclusion, development provides a suitable range and mix of housing on lands designated for future urban growth that is to be implemented through zoning standards that are appropriate to achieve compact, livable, and healthy communities. Those last few words, compact, livable, and healthy communities, are taken right from the PPS. So we're looking for compact development with subdivision application and its associated zoning bylaw that achieves just that. The review has considered the criteria set in section 5124 of the Planning Act. It includes the proposed subdivision represents good land use planning. Proposed zoning standards are suitable for development and are generally consistent with earlier phases. The proposed draft plan of subdivision zoning amendment are consistent with the provincial policy statement, conform to the policy of the United Counties and Leeds Municipal Official Plan and the Village of Westport Official Plan. And finally, we've prepared some draft conditions for consideration by the committee. In my report, I went into more detail on how we kind of come to some of those conclusions. So I'm happy to take any questions on that. And the next slide is simply my recommendation that the subdivision application for phase 3 of the watercolor Westport development is appropriate draft plan approval, is appropriate for draft plan approval, subject to municipal draft conditions set out in appendix A. And finally, that the zoning amendment is appropriate for the proposed subdivision. I would also mention here that these conditions that we've recommended would have to be sort of endorsed by municipal council, and then they get forwarded on to the county for consideration in making their final decision. So the counties would be assembling conditions from other commenting agencies, not just the village. So these conditions that we prepared are meant to reflect village interests, not those of other agencies like utility companies, conservation authority, etc. And the two go hand in hand. That's one of the reasons why I tried to, originally we were gonna come forward with a draft plan application for recommendation tonight. But with the recommendation, felt that it was important also to bring the zoning forward, because you can't very well approve the subdivision application with those lot sizes and configuration if you weren't also prepared to deal with the zoning amendment that is intended to implement the vision and direction taken with that draft plan. So on balance, all those things considered, we recommend approval, and the zoning would come forward to council sometime after draft approval. But the first step would be getting draft plan approval in place. So I'm happy to turn that back to there, and will remain available for questions.
Don't go far. So first of all, thank you. I know there's lots of questions. I think we'll maybe deal with the questions in regards to the zoning bylaw amendment to begin with. And then we can go to the subdivision draft, the draft plan of subdivision. I just want to say a couple of things. Our planner is, and our engineer are well aware of the path we have traveled in this regard. And has listened to us talk over several meetings. He's met with staff many times. He has read all of the reports from the public. I reread the comments from many of the people who came to the public meeting for the zoning bylaw twice before coming tonight. And many of them are concerned about things that have been explained. But they have either not had the opportunity to hear, you know, what they say about adult training or adult learning, tell them 5 different ways, 5 different times, and, you know, maybe we'll get it. So I appreciate that some of the community members have these deep set concerns. And I'm not sure how to move forward on them. Some of them were very much about the look and the style. And I think that we have an understanding of what little regard the provincial government has for the look and the style and the size of the lot. We have heard from Amy wasn't there, but the rest of us had our municipal lawyer come and speak specifically to the mayor's breakfast, speak specifically about appeals, and the ones he gave examples of are the ones that he was the municipal rep on and lost the cases of when there have been appeals to the land tribunal. And I think we just all felt that rather than, you know, us talking from what we heard in theory, it was important to have a practitioner there to explain from the municipal solicitor perspective how narrow a view, I think was the word he used, the land tribunal looks at things. He also explained in detail that the land tribunal doesn't look at things for an urban setting in a rural environment. They apply them equally across the province. And if we move forward with this tonight, there are gonna be people in our community that will, recall the last meeting we had where, we said, well, this is the last time, don't come back with another request. And I'm being bold with my comments because that was then. And you may feel that with the changes that the government has made, with our planner who has gone through this whole process with us, he's still standing here saying, this is what I'm recommending. I just wanted you to look at it from all perspectives. The fact that there's nobody here surprises me. And maybe that's something that they might not have known the zoning bylaw was on the agenda, but it was very clear that the subdivision plan was coming forward. So I'm not trying to bias anybody. We're all in this together. And sometimes in my other job, I have the opportunity to be at meetings where the provincial priorities are clearly stated. When the strong mayor powers that were announced effective the 1st of May, it was no longer tied to how many homes do you get built in your community, but the use of those powers are in relation to provincial priorities. So this is the time that we live in. The government feels very committed to doing whatever they can do to enable homes to be built. I was at a media conference yesterday morning where Minister of Housing introduced new legislation, and it is gone from 3 ARUs by right, so 3 additional residential units on your property, including your house, by right, to discussions of 4 levels by right. So sometimes when we're in the village, we talk to each other, we don't have the opportunity to hear sort of that unbiased reporting of what's happening in the rest of the province. Now, I know our planner and Mr. Rolston's planner at meetings have made comments about what's happened in other areas. And I too have heard the comments from the public that doesn't apply here. It does. It does. So we need to keep our mind on the report we've got. We've got Steve here, Steve Pensier, to answer questions. We've got Mark Bissett here, because I've got some questions when we get to the subdivision about runoff. There's been lots of questions about that, but I can certainly wait for that. So again, I'm not trying to bias anybody. I just wanted to take a moment. We hear the report, we hear the complaints from the public. We heard people say that they don't like the fact that people are jammed in there. I think somebody said like a can of sardines. Our job is to take all the information that we've got and spew that around. I'm not looking for any decision tonight. We're sitting at committee, but we have our consultants here where we might not have them in a future time. So that being said, Councillor Cardy was first and then Councillor Crapper.
Okay, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering about the exceptions for all the lots. Is this a zoning bylaw or is this a subdivision plan? So if the 35% to 60 or the driveway width, is this going to be a blanket statement for all 62 units or 60 units, or is it by specific lots?
Excuse me. The exceptions are applied to across the entire phase 3 of the subdivision. And the way the exception works is it sets out standards for singles, sets out standards for semis, it sets out standards for towns. Another approach could have been to put specific spot zoning on the blocks that have the semis and the blocks that have the towns. Rather than doing that approach and really sort of being specific, the approach that has been proposed is to apply an R2 standard, and the singles would be in accordance with certain R1 type of zone provisions, and the semis and the towns would be in accordance with another set of standards. So it's intended for some flexibility so that many of those lots on there are large enough that they could, like there are 15-meter lots, they're not the 12.5 that's been requested for the 11. So it provides for some flexibility so that some of those single lots could be divided into 2 and put a semi, increase the density, provide more housing, that sort of thing. So it's a strategic zoning approach that you see used. I've used it myself on applications that I've worked on, and it's intended to provide that level of flexibility.
Can you take a moment, just to remind everybody that we agreed early days about driveway width and extensions of patios. So we know that the zoning bylaw gives the width of the driveway, which is consistent with the garage door. And so early days, we recognize, you're just gonna break your ankle when you come out. So there was no issue from council in regard to that exception. And also, wasn't it the backyard, the deck or whatever extending into the side yard? Just what we've already debated and approved. I'd like to hear that.
So the current standard with respect to driveway widths is depending on the width of the lot, you get a different maximum width of the driveway. And that might seem like it makes sense to try and limit the driveway to sort of work with the width of the lot. But what happens is that it means that your driveway, in the case of a single, is oftentimes going to be limited to something narrower than what you would ordinarily plan to pave, right? You pave to the edge of your driveway, to the edge of your house. So the request here, which is consistent with previous requests, was that the driveway width isn't bound to that standard that's tied to the width of your lot. It's limited by no greater than the width of your garage.
Yeah.
And that's intended to simplify things, because you don't need things like building permits for driveways. But you want to make sure that people have a driveway that's functional, and oftentimes you see where people put pavers down the side of their driveway to try to make it a little wider. That technically would be an offense. So this is now meant to deal with the width of the driveway.
And it was the front porch. I just remembered it was the front porch being squared off. We already discussed that.
An earlier amendment was to deal with encroachments.
Yeah.
And the problem that we're having was that the way the bylaw provision worked, it wouldn't allow for some encroachments, particularly on side lots, when you've got porches encroaching into the side yard. So we've now made it consistent with the interior setback, so you could have it as close to 1.2 meters. So it's, I think what I would say, not to be difficult or hard on your current bylaw, it is a bit dated. There are some provisions in there that work nicely, and there are some that I find personally don't work well for me. Honestly, it hasn't been tested a lot. Over the years, I don't think Westport's had a lot of development. I don't think you disagree with me. So now we have a development that's coming forward, last couple of developments, and we've identified, or the applicants have identified some difficulties. So this is an opportunity to sort of bring things a little bit more forward, and I think some of these things will get fixed in a future bylaw. But they're meant to improve on things to reflect the reality.
Do you have a follow-up? No, Councilor Crawford.
Great, thanks. Actually, I wouldn't mind just touching on, in addition to the comments you made, Mayor Jones, and thanks, Steve, because the role of the engineer, the role of the planner and the engineer in this context is to, for us and the public, confirm whether or not in large strokes it's compliant with the plans, official plan of the county and ourselves. I do want to touch upon our official plan in relation to affordability later, but in general, that's the job. Whereas an elected official, a representative of the public, is here to hear the concerns that are out there and try and get our heads around what can and can't be done to help either assuage those concerns or take them and say that nothing can be done, and we agree. So I had a lot of calls today, and I read all of the comments as well. And I would say that in general, they're grouped into concerns that we are and can do some things, or that there is information potentially about that might help lessen some of the concerns. Information is power. And a lot of those questions have to do with the financial cost and benefits to taxpayers of development. We heard about that at the meeting. And I think in our budget coming up, we're going to learn a little bit more about that. But people's concerns to do with parkland and what the costs of parkland is, theoretically, it's a good thing. In practical terms, what will it cost the taxpayer here to maintain that versus, and we have parkland as a result of having smaller lots, right? The open space, rather than being on a property owner's under their responsibility, is now theoretically the responsibility of all of us to maintain. That's just guesswork. That's just, and we can get all bent out of shape about that, or we can provide answers for that. And I think that's my theme, providing answers to some of the environmental considerations. And in the report, Steve, you reflect pretty regularly on the environmental, the EIS, to stand for again, environmental impact statement. But we don't see what those recommendations are. It'd be helpful to me because we say in the report, we're going to comply with those. But I'm not clear on what they were. So it would be helpful, I think, to those who are expressing concerns about environmental. It's gone to the environment. It's had an impact assessment done. Would be useful for people to say, yeah, that has been done. Here's what the recommendations are, and we're going to ensure that they're followed up by the developer. That settles the concerns because those are the experts in environment. And lastly are the social, cultural sorts of things to do with growth. And I would argue in large part, there's not a lot we can do about that stuff. Change happens, is happening. But I think as councillors, our job is to continue to listen and to continue to try and, to the best of we can, in layman's terms, explain why, as you started out doing, there are realities of society that we can do little about, but there are realities of development that we can do some stuff about, like stormwater management. Our official plan actually talks about wisely of developing a stormwater management plan. And we probably could do that. And why would we not? Because we've got 10 years of development ahead. I think we'd feel better knowing that there's a plan that's suitable for that type of development rather than.
I only turn to smile to the engineer because that's something that you'll hear in the subdivision plan.
Awesome.
He is like entrenched in that.
Yeah,
So
but the public would be calmed by it, right?
Yeah.
Wow, you guys are investing in a stormwater management plan, not about watercolor, but about our village.
well, he's doing it for the phase 3.
Yeah, but still it would pertain to any development, as we have a letter later on that the same sort of theme.
Yeah.
So those would be a couple of examples of how we could continue to ensure that the public, that we hear the public's concerns. You've helped a lot, but it's at a high level. And frankly, what people respond best to are things that are like the parkland comment, which I hear a lot, was in a letter as
I saw
well.
the letter, yeah.
And what are the numbers? What are the cost benefits of development? It does cost, but there are benefits. And what are those financial benefits? Through tax dollars and through the other spin-offs that come to a community. People have that info. They can be less guessing. People tend to guess, I've learned only since being on council, negatively. Maybe, it's a trait humans seem to have, but I think we can do something about it by being attentive, not dismissing it, accepting it, figuring out how together we answer some of those questions. Because really, in fact, the provincial policy statement is going to, if there is a conflict between the provincial policy statement and an official plan of a village, and let's use the example of affordability, because our official plan says we're going to strive for, I forget, 15% or 20% affordable housing. And clearly this is not going to achieve that. And neither are the additional residential units, that's guesswork. But when there's a conflict between the PPS and our official plan, who wins?
Well, theoretically, there isn't a conflict now because the village official plan was approved under mind you, it was under the old PPS. But the new PPS in 2024 isn't that different with respect to affordability. So I believe that you can't force every development to include a element of affordable housing. Affordable housing is something different than attainable housing. And it's very common to see that interest try to be achieved through unit sizes, smaller homes, smaller lots, the provision for additional residential units will provide opportunities for affordable housing. But to add a section on the plan that's specifically meant to be affordable housing isn't something you see very often. Most of those projects are delivered by project-specific affordable housing projects.
So just a quick follow-up and more on that topic, then it would be contingent on us, since it's in our official plan, that we aspire to and commit to ensuring that the workers in our stores have somewhere to live that they can afford, which would probably be attainable, not affordable. but that we have a plan in that regard to try. And so like the stormwater management plan, and hopefully a future council will take that on too, to be aggressive at making sure there is a plan that we have set in stone and that we're moving towards, and we know what that is about.
So the legislation that went to the House yesterday has taken affordable housing out of it. Because I heard the minister with my own ears say, we need to get developers building houses and they're not prepared to build affordable right now. So not to take the wind out of that balloon, the air out of that balloon, we all agree, we all agree here.
Yeah.
Up here, the government's saying something a little bit different at this point in time.
It's simply, but it could be achieved through some policy around additional residential units and infill.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
are there barriers to infill that we don't know about? What is it that would spark that?
And it's funny, I'm sorry, we're not debating, but
No.
the counties has had two plans to support ARUs. One was county specific. I'm gonna say it was 25 grand towards the build. And the provincial had a program, I think it was 20,000 towards a build. We eventually took that budget line out because we had no takers. So
Yeah,
it's hard, and I think that where you come from, Marty, I so appreciate the amount of time and effort that you put into listening to people and speaking for them here. This is just a point in time where we've got this zoning bylaw application in front of us that comes based upon the recommendation of our planner, but let's not lose sight of these other things. I think staff are going to prepare for council in the next couple of months, a briefing note for you on a village-wide stormwater plan. Of course, it's always about money, but there will be something forthcoming. So
Great.
your voice has been heard.
okay.
And staff are working on something to bring forward and then council can decide. So thank you for your comments. Steve and then Councillor Aragona.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch on something else you mentioned about the parks. For the provision for park space. So under the Planning Act, as you're probably well aware, we're entitled through a draft plan application to acquire land for park purposes, whether it's taken as cash in lieu or as land. So in previous phases, it was offered as, or taken as cash in lieu that goes into a park reserve fund, or in this case, it's taken as land. When working through the draft plan review process, I thought to myself, what would the village want in this case? But the village doesn't have a master parks plan or a recreation plan that I'm aware of. A plan like that can help make decisions on what do you want park space for, how do you want to provide those kinds of services to your community. So when you're talking about stormwater management as a plan that would serve the community well, a parks plan is yet another one to add to the list, I guess.
Yeah, right. Thank you for that. Councillor Aragona.
Thanks for the briefing and the way that you packaged it all. And in the very detailed brief that you prepared, you had started off by explaining how it started with 172 units and then it was cut down. And now we're looking at only one part of that phase, so which is phase 3. It was originally 3A, B, and C. It's kind of difficult to sort of look at 3A in isolation when we're looking at a zoning bylaw without thinking about where everything's going. So if we're looking at smaller lots, more density, and we're gonna approve the zoning for phase 3 that way, how does that impact what's gonna happen with phase 4 and 5? Are we setting a precedent for smaller lots, more density, smaller driveways, et cetera?
I don't think you're setting a precedent. I think that the zoning that's been proposed for this phase works for this phase. The next phase will have to go through the same process to make sure that the zoning is suitable for that phase, and I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. It's a standard that's be consistent across the watercolor development. When we're developing greenfield sites like this, the stormwater management design that gets prepared to accommodate that, you call it density. I don't want to use that word density because we're not talking density, we're talking built form. it's meant to accommodate that kind of lot coverage and that sort of feel. It's different than the stormwater management you would have in a built area where larger lots might exist. So it's accounted for in the development and the design of subdivision. So if the next phase came along with the similar standards and similar lot sizes, as long as the design can support that, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Hello.
Go ahead.
You mentioned stormwater in the report. It's indicated that there are no stormwater design for this particular phase. We're gonna be relying on the existing stormwater ponds that are there. Is that right?
Well, there is a design for it.
Okay,
What I'm saying is that the pond as part of phase two is going to be the facility where stormwater from phase three goes to. But as part of that design for phase three, how it's handled on site utilizes the benefit of the phase two storm pond. So it's not that we're ignoring stormwater management in this phase, it's just that it relates to the earlier phase and how it kind of is designed.
and so that pond itself is enough to handle both the existing phases
That's right.
and the new phase three.
And if you remember, perhaps not, when the first phase was developed, part of doing a subdivision, we prepare what we call a conceptual stormwater management report. That lays out at a high level, how is stormwater management to be achieved over the development. So in doing a multi-phase subdivision, you have to think that, okay, if we're gonna use this pond in our second phase, we've gotta size it for that purpose. And phases 4 and 5 are what used to be B and C. They will have their own stormwater management design with their own ponds that work separate from the first pond, but they will have to apply the same principles to achieve a high level of stormwater management.
Any more?
Go ahead.
So my last question on the size of the lots and the units being put on them. In the brief, you refer to the opportunity for owners to eventually build additional units. But if the lots are so small, how can we do that?
That's true. In most cases, it would be infill, sort of basement apartments.
Right.
Planning Act allows for coach houses, if you want to call them that, or sort of backyard units. But that doesn't mean that it's gonna work in every situation. So in this case, most likely they would be accommodated through internal renovation that would allow for that to happen.
Go ahead.
Through your worship. A couple of things, as usual, I have a hard time dealing with the language of the planner. Some of the things seem to be, they talk about the developer's vision. And as I'm aware, that changes with the seasons, I guess, but some of the things I read, the recommendation in the provincial policy statement is that you go with like 70% low density, and then you have the two other densities. We've only broached the first two. I mean, we haven't gotten into any of the higher density. And what concerns me there is that because of the footprint of the village, the opportunities for development are limited to basically the new development and very few other properties in the village. And there's really no incentive or opportunity for young families to move to the village of Westport unless they have exceptional jobs, or they're kind of an elite. But the young people bring a lot to the village. They bring creativity, energy, they rejuvenate their social life. There's a lot of things that they do for us. And I see that opportunity fading. I don't see that, and houses aren't cheap anywhere. I'm not talking about the price, I'm talking about the relative price. So that's just one of my concerns, that we seem to be putting up roadblocks for that family, new family, young family, to to make inroads in the housing and live in a nice place. I mean, to me, a young person, a young family should have the same opportunity to live in a nice place that, you know, somebody's worked their whole life to put away a few bucks has. So, I don't see that as, doing much for that. I mean, we seem to be going behind, not ahead.
If I may, I'm not sure I understand the concern, like how continue.
The growth of the village, I mean, if it continues to be, people my age, it's, I mean, it's still a village, it's still a beautiful place, it's all of those things, but, I guess the requirements for younger families, like we talked about parks, and what, I don't know how many children, Councillor Cardy's a teacher, she'd have a better idea than me, but there aren't a lot of young people around, there aren't a lot of kids around. And parks are a great thing for sure, we have a beautiful park right in my backyard, and we have a couple of nice playground facilities. But the parks that I'm seeing, that we're looking at in the development will be for an old guy like me, if I can climb the hill and get up there and look at Sand Lake. I just don't see the opportunity for young people, and if I'm wrong, you correct me, I mean, that's.
Well, I guess what I would say to that is the original draft plan, had a lot of open space. If you look at the planning series, tons of it, it's like mostly passive open space, green space for pathways and trails. And one of the things that we were able to accomplish with this phase 3 was the inclusion of that smaller parkette deliberately to satisfy the need to program some space for families. So I see that as an important element to try and make the development suitable for young families that want to send their children to the park down the street. Without that, if we just have, like you say, open space, which has its own values, but not necessarily as being programmable. So I think that's an important aspect to make it a livable, healthy community. The housing is, in my opinion, suitable for young families.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's why I was confused by your comment, because I wasn't sure where it was going, because I don't see how this wouldn't be suitable for young
I
families.
didn't say suitable. It's absolutely suitable if you have the money.
I see, so it's an affordability.
Okay.
I
And
see.
when I say affordability, I'm not saying change the concept. I'm saying include more of your higher density approved, things that you've talked about, things that, would fit in with what's there. I'm not talking attainable either. I'm just saying that if, this home's $1 million and this semi or townhouse is $610,000, there's quite a spread there in the price. So young people are gonna, you know, anymore, I guess $600,000 isn't a big deal, but $1 million could be.
Well, I think that the development proposes smaller lots that accommodates smaller units, and that's why we have the exception for reducing the minimum units of dwelling size from I think it was 65 square meters down to 55. So we're getting to create some small units. Those are things that speak to affordability as well. So,
Okay.
as far as price points go, I can't speak to that.
And actually, to Councillor Card's point, one of the things I took issue with is a statement in the report that, will I find it now, but to do with a market desire for low density single family dwellings versus market desire for the smaller units, and thus the 80% single market versus 6%. I don't think so. I think that the people who have bought what's been built. I mean, all of the smaller density, the higher density units are selling too. If we were to do, as Councillor Card suggests, and require more than 6 units of townhomes or semis, they would be more affordable. And one of the biggest concerns I hear is from our business leaders who worry that we're pricing their employees out of the housing market here. So that's just a tag on and to that, but another.
So that's subdivision plan, the
Yeah.
zoning bylaw, go ahead.
Tell me if this fits or not. a piece of data to our point earlier, that would help this conversation and remove, I'd say, at least 50% of the concern in the comments is an updated D51. So it's been a while.
Okay, that's not what we're here
It's
for
not?
tonight, but
But
we
but
might get it later tonight.
Yeah.
We might get it on the agenda.
Do you hear how it would go? Because almost all of the comments were about wastewater, and if we can reduce those fears by
You'll
date,
hear it.
excellent.
You'll hear it from Mr. Evans in his report.
Super.
You're good.
One more question
Oh, go ahead.
to you, your worship. I'm just wondering, why are both of these on our table at the same time? Why would, if somebody's looking at doing something in the future, why would you not prepare by getting your ducks in a row and changing have the zoning changed and then say, I'm doing this based on this new zoning?
Well, so the applications were filed concurrently, so it puts before you a complete package of what is proposed. The point I tried to make earlier was that this subdivision approval, if approved, is based on some lot sizes that don't conform to zoning. So you need to have that zoning amendment approved to accommodate that smaller lot size. So if you weren't prepared to support the zoning, then you shouldn't be approving the subdivision.
Right.
Subdivision draft approval will come first. There's a condition in the draft conditions that we are recommending that is a standard condition in all subdivision approvals that the zoning be implemented as well. That can happen 2-3 months from now, as long as it happens before final approval. But we felt that it was important to bring them both at the same time so that you're making an informed decision on what the complete ask is.
And we also, you talked about in your briefing and Kim and I have had conversations with the developer. This started in February of 24. There were some long, lengthy delays, not caused by you, and to the point that they revised it February of 25, and there is a clock that ticks on these things. So in our discussion last week, I agreed with you that there's no reason not to bring it to council. I mean, you're here to explain to them. If they've got questions, they can ask them. If they think about questions afterwards, they can come back and ask them, but this is construction season.
Absolutely understand that, and I realize that, I'm banging my head against the wall here because reality is reality, but that doesn't mean I can't voice my opinion and tell you what I think about the situation and how I think it should go. Not to say that there's anything that we as a council can do to change anything, basically, from what I understand.
No, you're speaking to your constituency. We totally get it. So is Councillor Crapper. We totally understand. All right, so let's just kind of regroup for a minute. The zoning bylaw is something we approve. So we're sitting as committee. We can recommend it as like we normally do, pass a motion, recommend it for consideration at council, which always gives us that 2 weeks cold, sober input from people. So I think there's the motion that we've got is actually to approve both. We can split this. And then the subdivision draft agreement is something that we approve the conditions for the municipality. And then it goes, and then we wait for the counties to approve with the other stakeholders. And then they come forward with the decision. So before that can go forward, we really need to take a decision on the zoning bylaw request. Councillor Iguana.
Well, to that point, I'd like to follow up on something Councillor Card was saying earlier about the community itself. Would that be part of our conversation around the subdivision, or do you want to discuss it as part of the zoning conversation?
No, what's it relevant to? It sounds like it sounds like to the subdivision.
Okay.
Okay, it sounds like the subdivision. This is when they build, can they do that? Yeah, exactly.
It's related to the ratio of housing.
Understood. Yeah, understood.
Okay, so
Go
we're
ahead.
gonna,
Go ahead. Now it's here.
okay,
Because if you're suggesting a change to the ratio of houses, that's going to, well, that won't have an impact on the zoning bylaw. Because we're doing R2, so it's subdivision. The question is more about subdivision than zoning bylaw.
Yeah, the ratio of housing, if there were change, doesn't have
Because
anything.
there's bylaw, okay, so let's kind of keep this tidy,
Okay.
that it's about some lots. Depending on the discussion for the subdivision, some lots, whether they have a town, a semi, or a single on it. There are requests for amendments so that an R2 will fit phase 3 of the subdivision. Let's just debate that for a moment, and then we can come back to this conversation. And I'm right there, correct? That the zoning bylaw is just checking in. So tell me your thoughts. Are we there? I don't know. Do you have any other questions of Steve? Do you need any other information? Or have you received enough from the outside world in on what the situation is in 2025 in relation to lot coverage? Councilor Crapper and then Councilor Card.
I mean, I say, this comment is offered respectfully, and it's one of the things we heard at the public meeting. It's and it's about lot coverage. There's this, I believe, misunderstanding, but it's not been clarified, that a developer's interest in making smaller lots is to be able to build more and sell more homes. Right? We heard that a couple of times. It's like all the other things we've talked about, not necessarily informed by fact. It's a gut instinct, a negative one that people jump to. Is there a way, because it's probably just plain math, of sharing by reducing the lot size by the amounts we're talking about, which sounds a lot to go from 40 to 60%, but in terms of what it frees up for additional units to be built, my kind of gut take at it was that it doesn't result in that many more lots for houses to be built. Yet it's the thing people jump back to. Developers are there to make money.
They are.
Of course they are. But that our objective, it's been clarified by Steve Pence's report, is about smaller, more lot coverage in order for other purposes, not for other purposes. In our job is not to ensure that there's more houses and more money made. Our is to ensure that there are things such as consistency of home styles, compliance with the PPS for dense buildings, that kind of thing. Just, it's the recurring theme. And if there was a way of tempering that, which I think there is, because realistically,
I think it's our business.
I mean,
That's what I'm thinking. If I was a developer and somebody said, well, you know, how much money are you gonna make and how much less would you
No,
make this way? I think it feels wrong, Mark.
I guess so, but it's our business only in the area of the purpose of reducing lot coverage is for other things, and being specific about what those other things are. It's a long report. I see it all in there but it's important that we can all articulate that, because that's one of the questions we get asked a lot.
Yeah, just another comment. A couple of the conversations, one person much smarter than myself said that it's not some, before we dealt with the lot coverage, we gave up, like you reiterated there, we came to a mutual understanding of what was going to happen in the future. The future's here and it's not happening. So what's impacting a lot of people's thoughts is the double dipping. So you have a smaller lot, but you have more lot coverage. So that's double the impact. Let's say you have 1,000 square foot lot and you have 40% lot coverage, you're covering 400 square feet. If you have 60, you're covering 600. But now drop your lot size down. So you're eliminating two things. You're eliminating grass, let's say. I don't know how to put it another way, but it's an inversely structured formula. It's we're doing two things at the same time here, and that's a couple of people made that comment, and one person had actually, well, I wrote it down somewhere, but and as I've said from the beginning, a developer's job is to build nice homes, beautiful places, and make money. I mean, why would you do it for any other reason? Why would you subject yourself to, long days, long nights, and a lot of worry and sweat and everything else, and come out the other side with just a lot of sweat and worry? People have to appreciate what we have here in watercolors, but they still believe that the community should give some direction as to what they think they need in the way of, the final outcome here. And one fella, I forget the square footage, but he said there's about a 1,200 square foot saving on each one of those 62 lots as far as property goes. And if you take that times 62 times 1,200 and he divided it out, that equates to 9 more lots. That's good business, believe me. I mean, I agree with that, but can we temper that somewhere along the line with, beauty, function, and cost, and all of the things that go into that formula?
So I think that we could send some correspondence to the developer and ask them to disclose that.
Yeah.
You know me, I always come back, what authority do we have? So I think that we could ask, we could explain the challenges as you've described it, and could they explain the rationale?
Yeah.
I don't think.
Sure, there's nothing negative implied in that, it's simply data for people so they can not jump to conclusions, as Councillor Carter suggested.
But this is a business that
Yeah,
they're in, and the business we're in is looking at the information in front of us, what we know we are, what the scope is of what's allowed, what's legal, and beyond as recommending to the developer to share that information. I think it's outside of our authority to do when what we're presented with is a recommendation from our planner, from every source that we've got. Even our eyes, when we go to Ottawa, when we travel, we have a sense of how others don't have lot coverage issues. One of the things that in the report that I hadn't thought about, but when I read it, and then Steve mentioned it earlier, is that this community, part of our community, is enclosed. It's separate and apart from the Victorian part of the village, which is to the people who don't like smaller lots. They're not buying them, but they don't like the look of them, that they still have this part of the village to look at. So I've given this, like you all have, hours and hours of thought. And I know we have constituents who are sitting in their homes, maybe watching, thinking, just don't do it. Just, be strong, council, and say no. What authority do we have to do that on team? If there was a sliver there, I look at some of the people's comments who live up there and who are not happy with it. So, that probably more than anything, when I read the report, amazed me that people said I went in there, one person said I wouldn't have bought here if I knew this was gonna happen. So it comes down to what you, Councillor Crapper and Councillor Aragona talk about so often, is how do you communicate to people like that must have seen these big whiteboards and what the proposals were? So anyway, let's come back to our point, and then I want to talk about subdivision a little bit more. I'm mindful of time. Councillor Aragona.
Thank you. I just want to add something about lot coverage, not from the point of view of what I've been hearing since the public meetings that the builder has been having.
Information sessions.
The information session, sorry, that the builder has been having. I've had a lot of conversations with people that live up in watercolor and conversations with people that don't live in watercolor. And I have to say the majority of people have said to me that they understand now better the issue of lot coverage, and they don't really care about lot coverage. However, there's always a but at the end of that sentence, and the but is they don't understand how lot coverage impacts stormwater management. So if there's a communication issue that needs to be communicated, and that is, how does the lot coverage and the stormwater management design plan, how does that correlate? How does it work? And that's probably what we need to get across, not necessarily lot coverage, because everybody that I've talked to said,
it's the hard surfaces.
Don't really care.
So, all right. It feels like the zoning bylaw discussion, we're wrapping up because this is the subdivision, and Steve touched like a 1,000 foot on what stormwater was going to look like for phase 3. you want a little bit, like, and I know that was my question too, after reading the report, there was some really professional comments in there, but my concern is all the hard surfaces. So they don't have the experience that Kim and Peter and I have sitting with you two during particularly the last phase where stormwater was, I'm gonna estimate a 6-month discussion until we were satisfied, until the engineer was satisfied in signing off. So I'm sure if he read some of these comments and about, is it big enough? I just want everybody to know it was a in-depth, amazing process to watch until the day came that Mark said, this is good. More than that, Joe, do you want a few more details about what will go into the building of phase 3 in regards to storm? Because the subdivision plan is there, and then the work begins when the plans get more detailed. That as I've said at public meetings, people need to understand that Mr. Rolston has his engineers and his planners, but we have ours, and the final test is ours. So other than saying that quite spiritedly, in case anybody was listening, how or what sort of communique do you think would resolve the question that you asked?
Well, we're here tonight, so I think it would be worthwhile to have part of that explained, because the report that Novatech put together has a whole section about the pipes and the filters and everything else that go in there. So when you're reading that, it's explained
To us, but not
to
to
us,
them.
but to the general public, they don't,
Okay,
they're not reading these reports as in-depth as we are. So I think that explanation needs to
could be said orally so that people get it.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, so I'm not sure, Steve or Mark, whoever wants to talk about what does stormwater planning look like in phase 3 and how does it connect to phase 3?
Probably makes sense for me to try to.
Okay, that's good.
I would speak at, no, no.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
I would speak at a high level, but, I'm not the reviewer of the stormwater
Right.
design, so I'd be.
And Mark
stepping
came
out-
all this way.
Yeah.
I'd be stepping out of my.
Everybody knows Mark was our engineer, so please go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I work with Steve at Novatech. I'm a civil engineer. I've been helping with the review of phase 2 and now phase 3. So if I understand your question, that Paul is trying to figure out what's the impact as we change the impervious, the lot coverage, right? So the core answer is, as you make something, the lot coverage, as that you get more lot coverage, what's happening is you're putting down more impervious surface. So like things like your driveways, like your roofs, someone puts a shed in the back or a patio, and all those things, they contrast with what we call pervious surfaces, which is basically just like your grass or anything where when the rain falls, it'll get sponged up, right? So, I mean, that's the root answer, the difference. So as your lot coverage goes up, your impervious goes up, you get more runoff.
Right.
Right? So they have to account for that when they design the storm sewers and when they design the stormwater management pond.
And how to
So-
get to the pond.
And that
The
will,
path to the pond is important here.
yeah, well, that's just the sewer that takes the water to the pond. And if you get really, really heavy storms, it can actually go over land. We allow for that.
We did swales.
Yeah, there's swales in the back. So what you're trying to do, they're called LIDs, low intensity development. There's things, I consider them more like scrubbing. How can we polish and improve? So one of the things Landark did was they said, okay, we put rain barrels out. It's a way you can potentially catch. It can work, but only if people actually use them. And they may or may not, we don't know, right? Or you can put swales in the backyard. This is where your eaves trough will drain to the back, the runoff. The water, what doesn't infiltrate, gets sponged up, will go to the drainage swale at the back. And what we can try to do is it's another place where we can try to absorb the water. And it's just try to bring down that level that flows through the pipes, flows to the pond. That's really what we're trying to achieve. At the end of the day, what I'm doing, I'm looking at the engineer's report and making sure whatever the lot coverage is and the imperviousness of the subdivision, we can have it as high or as low as we want, and there's reasons to have it high or low. I just make sure the design work. And then we also stress test it a little bit, right? So, I mean, everyone's aware, a lot of talk about climate change and things getting worse and 100-year storms occurring more frequently. So what we do now is we We make the engineers turn up the dial. Okay, here's your 100-year storm that we're designing for. But let's make it a little worse and just make sure all the houses and everybody's gonna be safe. So.
We've got two questions now, Councillor Aragona and then Councillor Cardy.
So just for you, Madam. So just to, if you can take that thought for me, just one step further.
Mhm.
So we get it to the pond and we're reducing the amount of runoff that's going downhill, if you will, towards the lake. How do we mitigate that runoff? Like, what is it that we do after getting it into the pond to
Right.
make it go into the ground and make sure it doesn't go into the lake?
Okay, so there's two components there. First is, it's the drainage in the subdivision. And when we're talking about swales or rain barrels and all that stuff, what we're trying to do is scrub and just reduce the amount of flow that's getting to the pond, right? The pond it has two functions. One is for, we call it quantity storage, or quantity control, and the other is quality. So one, it's almost think of it as like a bathtub. What it'll do is it'll just slowly fill up. It'll hold the water and then slowly release it. And what you're trying to do is, it's mostly for erosion, and you're trying not to overwhelm whatever's downstream of that pond. So that's the quantity portion. The other is the quality portion. What we're trying to do is reduce sediments. You can get like, just in the grit, the oil that comes off our car, that's where contaminants build up. What we're trying to do is settle that grit out in the pond. It's called it's the suspended sediments that you're trying to settle out in the pond, so that what then goes out of the pond and then to the lake is cleaner.
Okay.
So, and that's all calculated, like, I did look at the stormwater management plan
Mhm.
that was submitted.
Mhm.
But most people won't go to that
No.
extent, they won't look at that, but
Mhm.
that's all calculated in the size of the pond.
Yes,
And so that's why, when I asked the question of Mr. Pence, in terms of the pond that's there is adequate to handle
yes,
phase 2 and phase 3.
100%.
Just take that thought and finish it for me.
Yeah, so when Landmark came forward with the phase 2, they had, here's everything that's draining to this pond, but they had this pipe, they had a vision for what was gonna happen upstream. As you know, they have visions for even, further phases.
Mm.
But they allowed for a certain amount of water to come down and through into that pond that exists now. And so what I've been doing is looking at their application, the report, and saying, okay, are you matching the lot coverage we've all agreed to? Is the maximum amount of runoff and drainage going through the pipes? Does it correlate with what we sized the pond to? And the answers are yes and yes.
Okay, and I like the 100% answer. Hopefully people have heard that. It's great. Go ahead, Councillor Cardy.
So through you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Aragona, Councillor Aragona asked my question. It was just,
Okay.
there was a storm here a month ago or two, and there was a bit of runoff, and there was a lot of complaining, and so we just want to make sure we alleviate any possibility.
Not in your
No,
work, in the
No,
village.
within the village, but right, that was many of our constituent
Yeah.
complaints, was that it came
Right.
from the subdivision.
Right, because I'm always curious, like, what's the nature of the concern from the community with the drainage and
Flooding
Yes.
basements.
flooded basements
Yeah.
primarily, or? Yeah,
Well, and I would say, as you guys pointed out, environmental
Environmental.
impact
Yeah.
on the lake, for sure.
yeah, so environmental side and basement flooding, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, and did you have a question over here?
No.
Okay, so any other questions for Mark? You guys are good? And any other, stormwater, so we're good. Any other questions for Steve?
Oh, yes, one.
One question.
Yeah, you mentioned there's a lot of reports listed there, and Councillor Crapper inquired about one. Where can we find these, Steve?
Talk to your CIO, Kim.
She hasn't.
Sure, okay, sure. Okay, so do you feel that we've asked enough questions that if we recommend that council approve the zoning bylaw, you can speak to your constituents? Councillor Carter.
One last question. Can somebody state definitively what the power of council is as far as bylaws go and the subdivision? My understanding is that they're very, 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 very limited. So Are we beating a dead horse? Do we take this any further, or do we just bite?
Well, we've already got their legal advice, we've had that, we've had the planner's advice, so I don't wanna say, I wanna answer that question, because you probably know how I think. I'm not finding anybody that says give her. I'm hearing everybody say, if they are authorized to do so by law, if, the provincial, policy statement, the PPS supports it, if it's consistent with provincial priorities. I do share some of those priorities with you that I hear as president of AMO. Our lawyer talked about some of the cases that on the face of them, go and fight it and lost. So you're gonna have to make up your own mind on that. I know how I'm gonna make up my mind, and I feel that when the people who were on there, the person who talked about the parkland, and this just means that the kids are gonna be playing in a park instead of in their own backyard. I think I can deal with that constituent when they raise that issue. When people if people who wrote in there about the size of the lots and the size of the houses, I feel I've learned enough that I can speak to the constituents. But, we are sometimes the meat and the sandwich. You can't please anybody, all the people all the time, or anybody any of the time. We really have to look at the information that we have in front of us. We're just zoning bylaw, then we are gonna flip to your points about the housing. So that's my answer to you,
Yes,
Councillor.
I'm just saying that, and I understand perfectly what you're saying. There isn't anything we haven't looked at. Everything that's been presented
It's on
falls
the
within
table.
the scope of, what's permissible.
That's
So
my understanding.
basically, we can just bite the bullet and be done with it and
Okay.
pass it.
Do you wanna make that motion?
I will make that motion,
All right, okay. Just like that.
just like that.
So the motion is moved by Councillor Card that the committee of the whole receives a report entitled Planning Watercolor Westport Draft Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Phase 3. And that committee of the whole recommends that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment proposed by Land Art for Phase 3 of watercolors after the draft period. Period. We're gonna leave the draft plan piece out because we want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Seconder? Councillor Argona? We know we have 2 weeks. It'll come back to council. And if there's something that we haven't thought of,
Well,
we can talk.
if I may,
Yeah.
and the purpose of our role is to hear people.
Oh,
So
for sure.
between now and 2 weeks, that's the reason. Not because there might not be a reason to vote against it, but to listen to
Of
constituents.
course.
So they have a chance to express their worries. For God's sakes, we don't have a job otherwise. That's why we do it.
Right, and part of my job as mayor is to bring as much information to you.
Yeah.
So that when you're having these discussions, it's not just going, oh, I know, that's a son of a gun, isn't it? Like, that's why I asked you, do you have enough information at this point to address the concerns that we think will be raised?
Yeah.
Okay, around here, yeah. All right, so you've heard the motion, it's to, recommend that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment. Anything else until 2 weeks comes up when we can discuss it again? All right, then I'll call that question. All in favor? That's carried. Now, subdivision plan, so there's some questions on the table, particularly from Councillor Card and Crapper, is, how many lots are semis and towns? And so they're falling on the, Kim brought it up for you. No doubt, when we approved the OP, we talked about, I talked about that. And so if I've heard your concerns correctly, Councillors Card and Crapper, your question is, can there be some amendments made to have additional semis and towns? Now, Councillor Crapper, I heard him say that they're selling. And so when I heard that, I thought before we move forward on this, there might be some additional information that we need before we carry that forward. Because you may find that they were a son of a gun to sell, and that might affect.
I'm simply asking for data to back up the assertion in the report that there is a high demand for the single units and not for the others.
Okay, so is that the sort of information that you'd like to come back with?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't feel the urgency for the draft plan. because others people have to weigh in. So we could, because this is gonna be a sticking point on the recommending the draft plan go to counties. What is the rationale for so few, or what is the rationale for so many singles, I think is the question. Do you have that data?
Well, I think that the way I would answer that is that the developers proposed this distribution on the basis of what they believe is selling. I don't have the numbers to support that or to not support it, but I can say that the official plan does strive for a percentage of singles or low density and a smaller percentage of higher density. And the numbers don't align 100% with that. The official plans are generally their policies, their guiding policies. So they fall short of it a little bit, but I'm still prepared to support that mix that they provided. What I would say to that, though, is on the subdivision, there are a number of lots that are in here that are 50-foot lots or 15-meter lots that would be large enough that they could accommodate semi-detached units on them based on zoning standards proposed. So as it is today, could accommodate a higher density through semi-detached units.
So
And the zoning that's been applied for over the subdivision would
Understood.
accommodate that without having to do another zoning amendment.
So what I hear you saying is this could be a win-win. That it could be a win-win that there are additional semis or towns, semis, I guess, that without having to change the draft plan could be accommodated. And I'm also understanding that our OP is clear that we would like more of dense, whatever the right word is. So how do we move forward on that? Do you want to, do we just defer this for a couple of weeks and have some discussions? You and Mr. Wilson's planner have the discussion to see what could come back in another version of the draft plan. Would that satisfy you two?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing is that certain members of council would like to see more attached housing within the draft plan.
Correct.
So some of the attached housing could be accommodated within the draft plan as it is.
Correct.
But if your desire is to see more townhouses, that would probably be laid out a little bit differently on that draft plan in the form of larger blocks. I would say that, so if you approve this, it would have to come back probably if county eventually approved it to come back for a draft plan revision. So then we're back into another process, or you could do it prior to then to revise this draft plan in accordance with those wishes.
Could it be a condition? Could you add that as a
I would
condition?
prefer to see it done as a draft plan revision that goes before council for approval rather than.
We're in the middle of a meeting, Mr. Rolston, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, I just had to clarify. Councilor Irigoyen.
So I think the official plan states the different types of units, but it's also part of the provincial policy statement. If I read it correctly, section 2 specifically says about creating complete communities that have different types of housing. And right now, and we're hearing that from the business community in town as well, that there's not enough different types of housing to accommodate different types of people. And if we're going to be looking at this, then we need to be looking at it from both perspectives, the official plan and the provincial policy statement. So I think that I'm going to agree with Councillor Crapper and Councillor Card that we need to look at how we include different types of families in this subdivision phase. And we need to figure out if it's townhomes or semis or whatever it is, but I think it needs to be in there because it's not there now.
Yeah.
We can't be just building a subdivision for, for older retirees that want a bungalow. We need to look at other things.
Mhm. We did comment early on for more attached housing, and the developer did provide more attached housing from the original plan, so that's a good thing. Your comment on complete communities, that's a very broad statement in the PPS about settlement areas and communities in general to be complete. So that doesn't mean every development has to, it means like providing services, providing, whether it be commercial, industrial, a whole bunch of different land uses within settlement areas. Right now, I think you have really one major developer in town that's building a subdivision. You don't have a lot of other developers looking to build apartment buildings and other types of housing in the village. But that's what complete communities is about, is getting other development happening. And until that comes, I think you have what you have.
I may have read it wrong then. There's a section that talks about improving social equity, overall quality of life for people of all ages, abilities and incomes, including equity deserving groups. There's a section about accommodating an appropriate range of housing options, transportation options, et cetera. So I don't think it's just industrial. I think it's talking about housing as well.
Those are very generalized policies from the PPS. It talks what a complete community is. And what I'm saying is that in this context, this is one aspect of a complete community. It's about providing housing, and it happens to be in the form primarily of singles and a few forms of attached housing. It doesn't propose multi-unit apartment buildings. That's fine. It could, but as part of a complete community, we would expect that type of development to also be occurring in the village, but there hasn't been any demand for that. I can't change that. I suppose some developer might want to come to town and do some development of that sort, but that's outside of our control. The policies and the plan would accommodate that, but until that comes forward.
So let's see what we can do here. I'm gonna look for a motion to defer for 2 weeks. And it would be to ask you and Mr. Wilson's planner, put your heads together. I think at this point, based on the design of the plan, where are there opportunities to increase the number of semis or towns? I suspect semis, when you gave us the width of those lots. Where I know Mr. Wilson wants to get in the conversation, but it's not appropriate at this point in time. So let's give him the opportunity so if I could get the motion to defer, and then we can have something substantial come back. So moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Cardy. And I think you've heard their concern. They also have to speak to their constituents. And we have all had these conversations from people in regards to the lack of smaller units. So let's see if there is some progress within the next couple of weeks. So any other discussion on that? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? All right. We'll leave it there. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'll take a wee stretch break. And we'll just go off camera just for a few minutes there, please, yeah. No, I'm just talking to Kim. Let's take a little stretch break and go off. Been hustle blast. Ready when you are. We're back in. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, public, if you're watching. We had a wee break. That takes us to 6.2 of our agenda, which is the communication survey results. The motion is moved by Councillor Cropper, seconded by Councillor Card, that the committee of the whole receives a report entitled Administration Communication Survey Results 2025 as information. Now, the briefing note that goes with this talks about doing a survey. We did it, the first survey as part of our strategic plan. We are going to have a update to our strategic plan. We're gonna talk about a date before we're done tonight. But we wanted to do another round of the communications survey so that we could consider that when we have our strategic planning update. So any comments to this point? So the date,
So one,
okay,
that the comments that were in this, you'll figure out a way of including the meat of those in a so that the public sees like
Yeah.
the most interesting
yeah,
information.
there'll have to be a lot redacted,
Totally.
but there'll be a summary that gets sent out
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, so when we talk about we talked about it here, I just want to jog everybody's memory. We talked about having a public meeting. We talked about doing when the summer people are here and doing a bit of a board presentation for the pillars that we have. So we're just looking at a date in July, which is, there we go.
What do you mean a board presentation?
So the pillars so we can break it down for
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
What the pillars are, council
Yeah,
can be
yeah.
standing, yep, all right. What's the date we picked? July 4th? Yeah.
The Thursday.
So it's a Thursday, July 10th. What does that look like for the team here at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock at night?
It looks like Nancy's birthday.
Oh, that's not good. Can we back it a day? What's the ninth look like? Is
Good
it
for
tennis night?
Oh, it's Wednesday night's fine.
Wednesday's good? Wednesday's good? Is that okay with you? So Wednesday, July the 9th, we can start planning it then. But that will be our public meeting for the strat plan update. You like it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I do too.
yeah.
Okay, so just get that in for the right date. All right, so we'll leave that to you, CAO.
Is this also so the meeting that was talked about at the public meeting recently on development charges that Bob Thompson and you were discussing, is this gonna cover that off too?
No, breakfast with the mayor covered that off.
Okay. I remember you saying you wanted that to be when the cottages.
Yeah, but then when knowing that these plans were coming
Yeah,
forward,
okay.
we wanted
All
to hold that.
Good.
All right, so we got the date for that. So in regards to the communication survey results, I'm just gonna call the question. All in favor? Very brilliant. Uh, 6.3 is quota donations to do renovation to the arena, canteen. And so the motion is moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Cropper, that the committee of the whole receive the report entitled Administration FODA Donations, and that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the donations from FODA to renovate the canteen room in the amount of $45,500.62 and direct staff to begin work on phase 1 of this project. Sounds great. Very good. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. 6.3 is building permit update. That'll be for information only. Moved by Councillor Cropper, seconded by Councillor Card, that council receives a report entitled Administration Building Permit Update Q1 2025 for information purposes. Comments, concerns? Go ahead.
One comment. I noticed there was a lot of building permits for solar panels. There's been a lot of chatter up in the neighborhood about the fact that RSL may have changed its policy regarding whether or not it's accepting input into the grid from solar panels. Wondering if we can ask RSL to have some communique go out to the residents about that. Is since we are shareholders in RSL, maybe we can put some influence on them to send
So
something.
see if there's been a change, and
Yeah.
if there has been a change, could they communicate with the stakeholders?
Exactly.
Sound fair?
It does. Peter, do you have more information on that? Because I know you were conversing with him about it.
Yeah, so here's a little bit, the moratorium on solar was at, this is the incorrect term, but the commercial industrial stage. So residential solar is still in, but we have been, we're just starting early stage of discussion on larger scale solar, so if that answers the question, and it is, I don't answer for you yet, but we are working with that.
So, as far as we're aware, there's been no change in policy.
Officially, yeah.
So they should call RSL on it. There's been no change. Perfect. Okay, call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Joe. 6.5, administration Tangled Garden Lost Penny 2025 patio extension. Moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Crapper. The committee of the whole receives a report entitled Tangled Garden Lost Penny 2025 patio extension request. And that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the request received from the owners of the Tangled Garden Lost Penny to extend the liquor license to the patios for the 2025 season. Any discussion?
No, just last year, there was some discussion and debate, and I haven't heard anything this year, and I thought they did a really good job, with its appearance and how well it looked, and there just seemed to be a lot of people using it last year, so
Mhm.
it appeared to be all positive.
Yeah, everybody's the same? Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. We'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Very good. 6.6. Request from Westport Tourism Group, and their marketing initiatives. And the motion is, moved by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Aragona. The committee of the whole received the report entitled Administration Request from Westport Tourism Group Marketing Initiatives. And that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the Westport Tourism Group's request to assume responsibility for the village maps and the advertising wall at Kadrinko's grocery store. Any discussion, Councillor Card?
Yeah, just to say, I think it's a great idea, or, we have a very active, committee, and they're moving forward in leaps and bounds, and, I think in the light that we don't provide any financial assistance in the budget, this is an opportunity to, as a briefing note says, lighten the workload for staff a little bit and provide some working capital for this group who are doing a great job in my mind.
Very good. Councillor Card?
I echo Councillor Card's sentiments. I think they're doing a great job, and I think, if anything can alleviate any extra work for our staff, but I'm also wondering if this would fall into the donation policy, this amount of money, or is that something we don't need to worry about?
Council, through to the CAO.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. As far as us donating to the Westport Tourism Group, is that what you mean?
No, just, how different organizations apply for, the use of the arena, would this fall under
Oh, the
that?
grants policy.
The grants policy, not donations policy, excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. It's not so much a grant, it's more of them assuming the authority and the responsibility over the entire project, both of the projects.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Well done. 6.7, Public Works. Moved by Councillor this is for the library entrance, moved by Councillor Aragona, seconded by Councillor Cardy, that the committee of the whole recommend council receive the report entitled Library Entrance Detailed Design for information purposes, and that the committee of the whole recommend council engage Eastern Engineering Group to continue the next phase by completing the detailed design and construction drawings of the new accessible entrance to the Westport Library to cost not to exceed $10,000 plus HST. That's correct.
And just a couple of questions to your worship. One of the options, designates a firewall or a fire rated wall inside the building, and you probably have Mr. Evans deal with that, but the other question was, it doesn't really say, on the options where the children's room is, it does on the,
Correct.
so
So
enlighten us.
I could
it
show.
depends on where, it really depends on the inspection by the engineers on where the entrance into the library goes. The preferred by the board is leave it right where it is. And so staff are working with them to,
She's in here.
staff are working with them, working with the board. They appreciate that and they agree. And if possible, the entrance will avoid the children's area, depending on whether it's doable to put doors in and that sort of thing. If it's not that case, then the entrance will be into the current child's area and the board will have to make some adjustments.
Another question to you. There's two entrances there to the vestibule and the reception desk is over here. Does that preclude the receptionist librarian from seeing everybody that comes into the building?
So that, I'm just smiling because these are the questions that we've gone back and forth. So there's no front entrance. There will be no front entrance. There will be, the main entrance will be the one at the top of the ramp and then the one in the children's area.
There are two entrances to the vestibule, one from the front room and one from this narrow room at the back. That's one of the options if you look at it. There's two doorways. One with
So
a-
there will be sight lines prepared for the librarian depending on the final configuration. They're talking about cameras and things like that. It just depends on where the entrance is and where she ends up.
And the firewall, is that a requirement?
Go ahead, Peter.
I want to say quickly first, so these drawings are the ones that were prepared earlier for the grant. The detailed design is going to see some changes, and based on what our worship just mentioned, that the engineers are reviewing the plans, and as stated right at the start, right at the top, the goal is to not impact the children's room right now.
Right.
These drawings were done based on all the information I had at hand. We've got one more kick at the cat to try to avoid that we think is possible with two doorways. So we've carried a little bit extra. You'll see instead of having a quote of $8,732.18, we have an upset limit to allow for that extra engineering review to satisfy what our worship said at the top. Interior firewalls, it's quite as we look at it, the engineers and the building department.
Okay.
Sorry.
And I guess, it's just an opportunity to, through you, if you could thank the board, Councillor Crapper, for their patience and them entering into lively conversations with us. We all have the same vision here, and we're just hoping that when we have a Christmas get-together at the library this year, we'll be using the new entrance and
Yeah, no,
it'll
that's
be good.
great. And they've appreciated, the conversations with Kim have been frequent and helpful. And I think Councillor Card, you have the potential to be a fantastic library board. You're really insightful and attentive to what's going on.
I'll call the question. All in favor?
I'm doing my hair that night.
All right, so this is the 2024 annual wastewater report, which will probably include the current 25-1. It's moved by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Aragona, that committee of the whole received the report entitled 2024 Annual Wastewater Report for information purposes. Any questions other than, is there, we're gonna tie this into the wastewater report, Mr. Evans. Do you have an update on D51 or can we expect one the next little while?
So Church, yeah, we should expect the next few while. The engineer is actually just saying go back today, just letting us know that they are working on it.
Okay.
We are still well under the D51 with the draft amendments brought forward. We have 176 units as for the last one, which we are going to see at council in the Q1, that our flows remain lower than ever.
Good.
And therefore, the D51 just continues to be more conservative than years past.
So for particularly the councillors who's raised this as an issue that the public is asking, we can say that the calculation is actually being done, but the experience of the water flows are very low, and so there's no bumps at all.
Yeah.
Okay, is that good?
I did have a couple other questions
Yeah, go ahead.
related to the report. I mean, it's a really interesting report. And it's really refreshing to know that we have an annual audit of this important part of our community.
Yes.
But I was confused because we just had this conversation and I reread the report around the capital charges stuff, in which that consultant shared in a chart a need to budget for wastewater treatment expansion in 2027. Yet the gist of the Burnside report is that our current wastewater system is working well. there are a few key areas that require rigorous monitoring, and we do that with the Burnside and with Mr. Evans' staff. But I don't quite see where those two align. So we got a thing that's working great. And we got somebody saying, well, we need to come up with 10.3 million minus whatever. And to start in 2027, that's just around the corner.
So Mr. Evans can answer that. So when we shelved the notion of discharge, surface discharge, and we've been looking at properties since then, we really haven't talked about this. So it's a fair question to ask. Is the EA still underway, and is there still a need to look to upgrade the system?
Yeah, so the more I answer this question, hopefully the more people are listening, the more you're listening, and perhaps it gets a little bit more polished, or perhaps not. But the attempt of polishing that off. So as we said before, the D51 is assuming that at every moment with the D51, wastewater flows are only going to go up from here. At some point, that is going to be true. There is less and less I&I reduced, and there's diminishing returns on investment for I&I. So it's always assumed that we're at the lowest point, we're only going to go up. There's a couple of criteria for when we start working on this process and when we are mandated to, and when we are specifically asked to, and what the thresholds used typically is around the 80% mark. So once we're over the 80% capacity, we start to ask, what are we doing about our capacity concerns? Because this process can take a long time. So we are right in the middle of an EA process. It is taking more time than we would have probably initially expected, but my opinion to council is that that is a good thing. We are moving one foot in front of the other as we work through the CA process. Council has a couple of different options, and we can rush it now. We can work through it slowly, or we can wait till that point where we're back against the wall. So will 2027 align? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on a lot of different things. It depends on construction. It depends on infill of the community outside of development. It depends on aging infrastructure and aging pipes and continued investment in I&I. So my opinion remains the exact same. Council is doing exactly what they need to do to solve wastewater in the long term and to continue to work with that EA process. The only thing we know right now is that there's going to be a recommendation coming out of that EA process. Once that comes, that will be better able to determine what money is needed exactly when and where. But to expect to not have to spend money, significant money on wastewater treatment in the near to medium future isn't borne out of the numbers. A low D51 now is not suggesting that we have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of lifespan in a treatment system that is already from the mid 70s. So we're working through that, and I think we're on the right pace, right course.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Can you elaborate? So the last time I heard the term EA process, that committee disbanded, and there was a small subcommittee of that group that we're going to look into, as Mayor Jones pointed out, potential land acquisition. Can you give us a current status of the EA process? Who's on it? What is it doing, and what should we be expecting in certain timelines?
Yeah, so sorry, Your Worship. So neither of those statements are the case quite. The technical steering committee helps advise the village and council as a part of the EA process. It's not a required part, and it has not disbanded. So right now, the work of the technical steering committee is awaiting more information. So it is stood by, if you will. I forget off the top of my head the exact terminology used, but it was communicated at those meetings to the parties that we are still in play, I guess, but we are awaiting more information. The subcommittee is not fully involved. It's not really a official subcommittee. It's a couple members are working on gathering information in their own way. They're going to present back to the technical steering committee, and that's fine. That's part of any person's role. But the village and the EA process is just waiting for further reports on the subsurface disposal. So since surface water was removed from the options that we're reviewing, now the focus is on the subsurface disposal, and council awarded at some point in 2024, I'm going to say mid to late 2024, engineering work specifically on determining potential sites for subsurface disposal. We were looking at reporting by May, we're not there yet. But that will be information that will be useful to, the technical steering committee and part of what they may or may not comment on. But definitely useful to the EA process, to the village and to council, as we go forward, so. All that answers.
A lot of polish there. Okay, Mary, Mark?
Yeah, I had a couple other small things. There was a comment about the private well, and I assume that resident's been informed. That was just a weirdly concerning thing about the private well testing that showed,
So through your commercial, so private wells, one was looked at, that is communicated through, that is a Ministry of Environment, concern, if you will. Should they choose to take that up or not is outside the village's scope.
okay. And last one, I just wondered about, so it's one thing to have a system from the seventies, but we have a lagoon from 2016. Lagoon is the right term. What's the lifespan of a lagoon?
Go ahead.
Yeah, through your, it varies. So the lagoon, so cell 1 is 1973, cell 2 is 1993. Maybe this is one of the questions, but the history is they were storage, initially, it was a factory lagoon cell 1.
Yeah.
1993, cell 2 was built as a storage pond, which was fed from cell 1 and then fed back to cell 1. Treatment was effluent, so it's no effluent. The cell 1 was converted to a facultative lagoon system, where the cells go in series and that then discharges to subsurface. So in 17, 18, 19, when the system was designed, constructed and brought online, the ponds each feed into each other. So the original pond,
All right.
the largest pond, the brunt of the treatment is still 1973.
Yeah.
Lifespan does vary. We know we're gonna have a lot of work in there and we're working on some of the background pieces there and doing a lot of the groundwater monitoring and pieces around that. The lifespan varies wildly. Like it depends a lot on its maintenance over the years and the conditions around it.
The last one, I swear. So that maybe it's a misconception, but chloride leaching, for example, is that a function of a 1970s lagoon? I think people like me have this understanding that it's the new, I think people think of it as a new lagoon in 2016, but it was a redo of an old lagoon. Is the chloride leaching it because it is such an old original structure?
There's, in short, chlorides have nothing to do with the age of the structure.
Yeah.
Whenever we're looking at any type of treatment train, treatment process, typically we set the requirements of the effluent and work backwards from there. This was done prior and post, but the chloride specifically, there is no real removal method for chlorides.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue with chlorides as it relates to growth and expansion was there. When we're nearing the ability of the groundwater to attenuate parameters, chloride is near or at its limit.
Okay.
Therefore, we cannot add any more flow to that system and expect the attenuation required. The difference between groundwater and surface water or treatment process to treatment process is just based on parameters that are affected or affect that piece. So the chloride issue is the wrong word for it, but is that it does not allow any meaningful expansion within the land area that we have, or even the land area around it. There was earlier reports showing that when we looked at additional area, how much that would result in increasing flows, and it was negligible.
Right.
So therefore, it wouldn't support growth, we were near capacity. So a brand new system wouldn't treat chlorides any differently, but would be designed so as not to impact the environment.
Yeah, good. Nicely polished.
There you go, very polished. We like it.
Mind blowing.
Little spit shine. Thank you, Peter. Anything coming out of that? You were all engrossed as I was, weren't you? All right, so it's, I'm just gonna call the question then. That was a while ago, moved by Amy, seconded by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Aragona, that the committee of the whole received the report entitled 2024 Annual Wastewater Report for information purposes. All in favor? Carried. And the next item is the 2025 Q1 briefing from Public Works. Moved by Councillor Aragona, seconded by Councillor Cardy, that the committee of the whole received the report entitled Public Works 2025 Q1 Briefing for information purposes. Any comments? All interesting stuff. Go ahead, Councillor Aragona.
I just, a curiosity question for Public Works, through you, Madam Mayor. Peter, what is level 1 water treatment certificate and why is it important?
Okay. So first, I need to apologize to council. So it appears I've uploaded the incorrect document to the agenda. That is the Q4 briefing note, or the Q4 briefing. So Q1 will follow the council.
Oh,
My council might have already seen it before. Yeah, so related to.
Photos before?
I both up, of course, and the level 1 treatment. So council may remember out of the inspection report, the opinion of the inspector was that the treatment system we operated was in fact a treatment system. It used to be classified as a distribution and supply. Based on the engineering report from decades ago, the plant from decades ago, it was the inspector's opinion that it was actually a treatment system. We worked through some of the process on that to get it reclassified to follow that MECP standpoint. In truth, some of this was mentioned at the inspection report, but the opinion of staff provided to council was simply that we were on this path anyways. Council's actually deliberated the project to add cartridge filtration at the plant anyways. So we were going to get here. So there was no real reason to fight this point out. Our operators are licensed and had already passed their exams for this class of system. So all it means is that the little building by the basketball court and arena and the restaurant is it's a little treatment plant as opposed to it being considered a part of the distribution system that was previously. That's it.
Understood. Thank you. Good.
All right, then
Questions?
we're gonna do, oh, go ahead, Councillor.
We're really synced up.
Yeah, we are, that's scary.
Quick question. Because we see stormwater catch basins inspections and maintenance, it begs the question, when we do take responsibility for the new catch basin storm ponds, how significant a workload issue and I guess a cost issue overall do you anticipate that being for us?
So through your worship, it's not significant, primarily because the village is in a good position where we aren't taking on anything that we aren't used to already working with before. So whereas other rural communities might not have water and wastewater at all, or might have never had stormwater systems, that's not the case in the village. So we already have the most of the tools and equipment and definitely the expertise in handling those. Stormwater ponds and lagoon cells are similar in their maintenance and upkeep and their long-term planning. Additionally, the advantage of subdivisions that are so rigorously scrutinized is that we want to make sure that they're properly designed and good shape to start with. And then simple things that are a benefit to general urban areas such as this, it meets all those definitions, is that there's a rather large number of lots, units that service that piece. So this isn't a stormwater pond for a dozen units that cost has to be spread over a few folks. Those lots are well designed. Stormwater pond is well sized, and that is funded the same way the catch basins are inside the village. Now or future.
Well, that's great news, because that's one of the things that gets kicked around, right, is those ponds are gonna break us down the road. So we're gonna be able to handle the maintenance operating needs of those ponds ourselves as we move forward.
Go ahead.
I can easily get a jail-free card on that, as long as the village has a good and robust asset management plan that brings in these life cycle costs and looks 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the future.
Right.
Absolutely, and then as long as we keep up on those maintenance items, and the staff are definitely committed to doing that, it's important for us. We keep up on maintenance, we make sure those last for a long time.
Thank you.
All right, so I deferred that motion because it's about the report, which is a previous report. Go ahead.
Just a question and a comment. Where do we stand on our extended treatment time for the water supply?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Absolutely. So like, to answer your, so we're chasing down that contractor that has given us, a strong desire to work with it. So we're still working and trying to secure the contractor to install that. It's a small truck project. We were really hopeful we found someone that was willing to do it. I'm still hopeful that they'll do it. It's been tough to find a qualified contractor for a project like that, but we're still working on that. The design's been done, the ministry's been prepped, the budget will be deliberated shortly, and we will, we're still working on it. As best of God.
Okay.
And the comment was, it was great to see our own equipment out cleaning the streets this year. The guys did a great job on it, much superior to what we've experienced in the past by outside contractors.
Yeah, yeah, particularly our roads are very, very clean, not so much the county roads around the village, so. I don't know, did they do them, they might have done it, last year they did it like 1st of March and there was more snow and grit put down. All right, so we're at 6.9, we are at 7.7, information items. And it's moved by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Aragona, that information items 7.1 to 7.3 be received as filed. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor, carried. Any notices of motion? Announcement.
EcoFest is coming up in a couple of weeks, and I can say as an inside observer that it's grown a lot. And there's a lot of interest in it from
Good.
all over the region, and they're anticipating quite a lively event, partly at the harbor with the Voyager canoes again, partly at Lockwood, partly in the arena, and all about. So it's, I mean, just people's interest in sustainability and environmental issues is, but that this group has sparked that kind of interest is a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, lots of advertising up, it's good.
Yeah.
Councillor Cardy? No?
Good.
Anybody else? Did you want to talk about, we finally got some word on the grant?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sure. Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. Excited to announce that we have been successful in securing the $2 million grant through the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund. Now that is for, Peter can elaborate probably a little bit, but we don't have all the information that we need. We'll be following it up with a briefing note. But for the projects outlined in the GHG reduction plan that council approved.
Yeah,
So we were successful.
Congratulations.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, good. So we'll get more on how does that break out and.
Is that primarily arena?
Yeah. It is, it's for the larger equipment,
Yeah.
ice plant, things like that,
Yeah.
for the arena. But we'll bring back a briefing note with all the specific information in it. We have to meet with the grant authorities before we can.
Congratulations, that's excellent.
Yay.
And just another reminder to you, Madam Mayor, that there's a budget meeting next Tuesday, March 20th at 5 PM in County Chambers.
When will we see the preliminaries on that?
That could be as early as tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, council, and then we'll release it to the public
That'd be good.
Friday.
One weekend, it's a long weekend.
Yeah.
All good news. Any other announcements? I don't think I have any.
Oh, don't forget the boot drive. Foda's having a boot drive in the weekend, so be prepared to stop, donate.
Stop at every stop sign, fully stop. That cop out there, did he ever get a lot of people when he was here pulling people over the other day? Including my wife, who was a rolling stop. And he appreciated that, he just gave her a little warning, but, he does get people to
Does.
recognize that
Yeah.
they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
But, the boot drive works better when people stop at stop
Yeah.
signs.
Pays better.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, any questions from the public or the media?
None.
Okay, so we're gonna go into closed session just for a couple of minutes. It's moved by Councillor Aragona, seconded by Councillor Cardy. The committee of the whole adjourned in the closed session to consider personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal employees. All in favor? Carried.
couple this year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Our report out was we received a briefing from staff and took no action. And our next motion is moved by Councillor Aragona, seconded by Councillor Cardy, that this meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Village of Westport be adjourned at 7:43 PM. All in favor? And we're out. So for the public, budget meeting next Tuesday, 5 o'clock. We'll be here to have a look at our budget, and then council follows 2 weeks later.